The Spanish Grand Prix exposed a problem that has followed Ferrari from the beginning of the 2025 Formula One Championship, namely managing ride height, and also highlighted the contrast with McLaren, particularly how the MCL-39 is outperforming its rivals. It is no secret that Ferrari, since the first race weekend of the season, has been forced to juggle its ride heights, constantly trying to keep the car as low as possible to maximize aerodynamic load, while also raising it just enough to avoid excessive plank wear. This is an issue several teams face, but for Ferrari it is even more crucial in the fight at the front. At the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya in Spain, a track full of high-speed corners where the car tends to compress, this limitation became clear. To fully understand it, we need to step back a bit. Like Ferrari, McLaren also tends to run the car low, and at times the MCL-39 has shown porpoising. As reported on Friday, the Woking drivers weren't pushing to the absolute limit in high-speed corners like turn 9 or 14, where the floor often scraped the track, slightly unsettling the car. After analyzing Friday's data, McLaren took a small step on Saturday, continuing to live with the porpoising, a bouncing effect that also explains why the MCL-39 was scraping the track surface the day before. Despite its strong downforce, high-speed corners have never been McLaren's strongest suit. The car shines in other areas. Why is this relevant to Ferrari? To understand, it is useful to examine the race of the Ferrari drivers, especially Charles Leclerc, who remains the Maranello team's main reference point and best interpreter of the often nervous SF-25. The ride height issue became particularly interesting during the second stint, when Charles Leclerc appeared able to match the pace of McLaren's Oscar Piastri, who was leading at the time. Of course, the Monegasque had stopped earlier, knowing he had two sets of mediums that would give him more consistent degradation, but the topic of speed through long corners remains key. Ferrari pushed aggressively to keep pace, looking at the speed through faster corners, where protecting the front left tire is crucial. It is clear that Charles Leclerc was pushing hard in those sectors, while McLaren was managing. This was seen in turns like 3, 9, 13, and 14, showing that Ferrari had to force the pace to keep up, while struggling more in the slower sections, where McLaren had better rear grip. The Monegasque driver pitted after 40 laps, both to use another medium set and to cleverly avoid traffic. A few laps later, McLaren revealed what it still had in hand, a necessary move as Woking's strategists had started to worry that Max Verstappen, on a three-stop strategy, could become a threat. Despite running tires about 20 laps older, Oscar Piastri was able to increase his pace by several tenths, pushing through high-speed corners where earlier he had been managing. The change in pace was so dramatic that he was able to match Charles Leclerc's times, despite the Ferrari driver having just pitted for fresh tires of the same compound. This helps explain the difference in race pace, but it also ties back to the unresolved issue of ride height. Pushing in high-speed corners, especially when trying to run the car low like Ferrari does, can increase plank wear, and it is no surprise that McLaren was initially conservative in those areas. At the same time, radio messages highlight the issue, as Ferrari's ride height problems also showed in radio messages sent to both drivers during the race. First, they were told to do lift and coast before turn 1 and sometimes turn 10, lifting off the throttle slightly earlier than usual. While this helps manage tire and fuel consumption, it also reduces plank wear. Even more interesting was what happened on the main straight. Over the years, bumps have formed in the asphalt due to speed and stress. The lower the car, the greater the risk of hitting them, which leads to wear on the plank and a loss of top speed. During the race, Ferrari repeatedly asked the drivers to change their line to find a smoother area. But there is a problem. Since nearly all cars take the fastest line, rubber marbles accumulate off the racing line. Moving into these can reduce grip even further. That is why there were internal radio discussions about how to avoid the bumps without ending up on the marbles. This ties back to the request for lift and coast before heavy braking zones, a request made even after the safety car period, despite the cars running fresher tires and having burned off excess fuel. It further indicates the real motivation behind the instruction. Ultimately, Ferrari continues to be as aggressive as possible, but it is clear that the Maranello team needs to introduce changes to fix a problem that has been holding it back for far too long. The SF-25 single-seater unfortunately remains a difficult car to get into the right operating window, with a major weakness in qualifying, but in recent weekends the results have improved enough to bring Ferrari back to second place in the Constructors' Championship. McLaren remains far behind in points and performance, but the 2025 season can still offer some satisfaction, especially if upcoming upgrades bring significant progress in the most problematic areas. The prospects for the Maranello team were outlined by team principal Fred Vasseur after the last Spain GP, which concluded the European triple header before the Canada round. The 2 consecutive podiums earned by Charles Leclerc in Monaco and Barcelona partly corrected the season's balance and boosted Ferrari's morale, but the results from the first 9 races of the year were still below expectations. Frederic Vasseur, interviewed by the Italian media, considered the key issue to be the SF-25's poor qualifying performance. He explained that the car's pace during the race is roughly on par with rivals, but it suffers much more in qualifying than in races, more so than last year. He recalled that at Jeddah, the pole position was about 3/10 away, yet Ferrari was the fastest in the race. At the Imola circuit in Italy, qualifying was disastrous with both cars eliminated in Q2, but they recovered well the next day. Frederic Vasseur pointed out that with 4 teams at the front, to win you cannot afford to start from the 3rd or 4th row. Trying to define the SF-25 single-seater, Frederic Vasseur described it as sensitive, adding that the team struggles to place it in the right window to maximize tire performance. He highlighted Imola and Miami qualifying sessions, where Ferrari was faster on used tires, something he said he had never seen before. Asked about the aerodynamic updates expected on the new floor and rear suspension between Canada and Britain, Frederic Vasseur was cautious, confirming that developments are on the way and Ferrari does not intend to abandon the current car yet to focus solely on 2026. He said they have some upgrades coming, but it is not yet time to think only about 2026, although they are all close to needing to do so. The Ferrari team principal declined to make promises to fans except that they will give 200%, pushing hard even though competitors are also working hard, and said the team's approach is good. Regarding the 2026 Formula One project, Frederic Vasseur added that they are starting from scratch and that it is exciting for everyone. He described it as a completely new challenge, recalling nothing similar in F1 and emphasizing that it is impossible to have references compared to other teams. On the driver's front, Frederic Vasseur spoke about Lewis Hamilton's difficulties and Charles Leclerc's progress. The French manager said Lewis Hamilton's issues are a matter of details, hundredths of a second that in such a balanced F1 can mean the difference between the 1st and 3rd row, or a good weekend versus a less good one. These details relate to car understanding, setup, and communication, which is normal when changing teams. Lewis Hamilton appeared very sad and down after the Barcelona Grand Prix. Regarding how to restore his morale, Frederic Vasseur said it is about continuing to work and push together, adding that the collaboration is honest and good. The French manager noted that more is learned from difficult moments, which helped them come back stronger, and also mentioned that both cars had an issue in the last stint in Spain, which affected Lewis Hamilton's performance last weekend.